Caucusing is a really easy thing to do. It does depend if you go to the Democratic or the Republican caucus, because both political parties have different forms and formulas that they follow, different procedures. The Republican caucus is much more of a straw poll. People arrive at the caucus, people might give a speech advocating for a candidate, and then at the end of that round of speeches, the attendees will cast a secret ballot. The total will be tabulated and then sent to the Republican Party of Iowa, and there it's kind of all the data is accumulated to determine who wins. The Democrats have a different process. It's much more detailed. Attendees will break up into what we call preference groups of each of the candidates. And in order for a preference group to be viable, they have to have at least 15% of the room represented in each preference group. So in this case, we can maybe assume that Martin O'Malley might have difficulty getting to 15%. So if you're a Martin O'Malley supporter, the question becomes, what do you do? And you really have three options. You could go home, you could go to what's called uncommitted, or you could go to either one of the other two candidates, Senator Sanders or Secretary Clinton. What's interesting about the Democratic caucus is once somebody becomes not viable, then the other candidates and the other campaigns start trying to woo you over to their side. So if you're going to be 18 years old by election day, which I believe is November 8th, 2016, if you're going to be 18, you can actively caucus at either the Democratic or the Republican caucus in your precinct. Now you have to register as one of those party members. So if you're a Democrat, you cannot go to the Republican caucus. If you're a Republican, you cannot go to the Democratic caucus. If you're no party, you can't go unless you register for that party. If you're not going to be 18, you can still go as an observer, and both of the parties will use you, would love to have you, maybe might put you to work as a volunteer, or just want to kind of get you acclimated and get ready for future public service. Well, that's an interesting question. It's one we get asked a lot. Really, in 1972 is when the Iowa caucuses kind of came onto the forefront. But I think Iowa, for a couple of reasons. Number one, Iowans are pretty politically engaged. They take politics serious. They are very active in what's going on throughout world and national affairs. Number two, it actually takes a lot of work and kind of practice to caucus. And because we've been doing it for so long, we kind of have that act down. And number three, maybe not from a demographic standpoint, but kind of from a kind of an Americana standpoint, that the average Iowan is kind of representative of the average American. It's very important. It's important for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's important because it's number one. The Iowa caucuses have done a pretty good job of kind of removing the second tier kind of layer of candidates, and there will be people that will drop out the Tuesday after the Iowa caucuses. They're also important because they are party meetings, and that's their primary function. What people don't realize is we have caucuses every 2 years, but they only get a lot of play, a lot of press in presidential years. So they're very important for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to organize themselves, because each caucus is at the precinct level, and there's about 1,700 precincts in Iowa. Well, absolutely go to a caucus. I went to my first caucus in 1988 as a young kid, and I've been to every caucus since. It's a great experience. It really, it's the political process and action.